Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blossom Review. How are you? Today we're talking about a very special, very unique Japanese series that you can find on Netflix. We're talking about The Hotspot. If you were a fan of Japanese dramas, you might have already heard of this show or you might have already watched it. But The Hotspot was written by very famous comedian, scriptwriter Bakkarizumu, who also wrote the award-winning rebooting, also known as Brush Up Life, with the marvelous Ando Sakura back in 2023. So The Hotspot is his latest endeavor. The Hotspot is a 10-episode series that aired on Nippon TV from January to March 2025. And the show introduces us to 41-year-old Endo Kiyomi, played by Ichikawa Mikako, a single mother who lives in a scenic little town at the base of Mount Fuji. Endo works at a hotel and she leads a fairly ordinary existence, that is, until an alien saves her life. The Hotspot is naturally quirky and endlessly charming as it blends fantasy, comedy and slice of life in an impeccably executed story about acceptance and community. Endo's journey is visually and narratively captivating, a story that unfolds calmly and optimistically and offers an experience that entertains, but it also challenges us to reflect on our own beliefs, attitudes, and relationships. If you haven't watched The Hotspot yet, don't worry, this review is spoiler-free. Carrying on the spirit of rebooting, let's say, The Hotspot illustrates human nature in all its diversity and contradiction. Endo, her colleagues, and her friends are well-rounded characters who, through their seemingly meaningless conversations and silly endeavors, examine humanity as it is. People in The Hotspot are self-centered and petty and arrogant and superficial and grumpy, but they are also kind and generous and courageous and forgiving and reliable. They say one thing, but they believe in another. They play pretend to avoid hurting somebody else's feelings, and they all see themselves as the protagonist of the story. They are human, and just like us, they have strengths and weaknesses. They have good and bad days. We recognize and relate to these characters because we are these characters. We instinctively laugh at their foolishness and their vices because we know what it's like to be them. They are so well executed that they naturally create an environment that is as natural, as ordinary as they are. And their little universe is one where everything is incredibly mundane and yet extremely engaging. Characterization and world building are easily and successfully established because the narrative of The Hotspot is almost episodic for most of its run, which means that the narrative is composed of smaller events that are introduced and solved within a single episode. With every episode, we see these people face problems that we've faced before, and as they work together to solve them, The Hotspot slowly weaves the emotional and thematic fabric of the series. Ordinary matters of whether you've still got seasoning back at home or how you're going to fix the boiler are some of the greatest conflicts in this script, allowing us to empathize with these scenarios, despite the alien who lives around the corner. We are naturally compelled to care, even though these scenarios are so mundane, not only because they are so familiar to us, but also because the characters sincerely care about these problems. And if the characters care sincerely, we are naturally compelled to care too. This universe becomes extremely tangible, not only because of familiarity, but because of contrast and the humor that we find in the absurd. Our alien, the hotel worker Takahashi Kosuke, played by Kakuta Akihiro, doesn't look extraterrestrial at all. His appearance and attitude couldn't be more human, but he just happens to have a couple of superhuman powers that other people don't. Instead of saving the world and healing disease, Takahashi the alien focuses his time on Gonpla figures, and he couldn't be lazier at work. With Endo and her friends, Takahashi is pushed out of his comfort zone, yes, to become a better person, to stop a meteor from hitting the earth. Nope, he's pushed out of his comfort zone just to pick up a volleyball stuck on the ceiling or to apply a glass screen protector on a smartphone. Even though he's extraordinary, his abilities are used to solve ordinary problems that we, mere mortals, would be just as capable of solving. This dichotomy between the remarkable and the commonplace is what marks the main theme of the series. Soon, Endo and her friends discover that we are all a lot more exceptional than we realize. At the same time that we're indeed the same, we all have our own quirky traits. So the question is, how can we define what odd means and what normal means? The universe of the hotspot is as quiet and dull and perfectly ordinary as it is strange and unexpected and bizarre. So the hotspot reminds us that the only thing that makes life normal is the fact that no one is ever normal. We are all peculiar somehow, but we all face the same dilemmas and feel the same emotions and need to rely on one another in the same way. Throughout their ups and downs, the characters in the hotspot learn to appreciate who they really are, developing an almost quixotic, idealistic bond of acceptance, empathy, and camaraderie. Now, if you're expecting flying saucers and long, exciting CGI sequences, let me clear up this misunderstanding right now. The hotspot is the complete opposite of the X-Files, in which you are supposed to trust no one and fear the unknown. Contrary to the cynicism that plagues modern society, the hotspot embraces the infinite possibilities that surround us with open arms. In a hopeful and comforting way, we see these characters place honest trust in one another, and we see this trust not only being valued, but also blossom into stronger and healthier relationships. Strangeness in the hotspot doesn't come from fancy visual effects and little green men, but it comes from our own human paradoxes. The hotspot builds its charm from its sincere simplicity, allowing us to see beyond the commonplace, to philosophize about human nature and our hypocritical rejection of otherness. Dialogue is perfectly written and delivered, giving rhythm to this story and also playing around with humor and subtext. Also, the hotspot is the perfect example of how to use narration to enhance the narrative and not only describe or exposit information. Narration in the hotspot is masterfully used to highlight contradictions, to build characterization, and of course, for comedy. The series also enjoys making fun of science fiction and similar media, adding yet another layer of meaning and humor to this script. The hotspot is particularly full of references to Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial, with the characters mentioning this film all the time throughout the show, and the series also making use of visual and narrative throwbacks to E.T. So it's quite fun If you're a fan of ET, it's quite fun to notice these little things that they sprinkle throughout the show. Now, I must confess that I loved The Hotspot wholeheartedly. I think that this show is fascinating. But I must confess that my favorite thing about this show might be the visual identity that was given to it. I think that visually, The Hotspot is flawless. The color palettes, the texture, the compositions, the blocking, not only give a sense of warmth and singularity to this story, but also establish a universe that feels lived in. Most importantly, this visual identity, these compositions, allow for different events to happen simultaneously within the same frame, a device that becomes key, especially in the second half of the series. So you have different places, you have different events taking place at the same time within the same frame, and they are very good at directing your attention. So if they want you to pay attention to this first, they will make sure that you focus on this, while there is this other important event taking place in the background. And then later on they will say, remember that moment back there? Now take a look here. And then you see that there are so many layers within that one frame, which for me was fascinating. And as soon as I finished The Hotspot, I told myself, okay, I'm gonna watch this from the beginning again and try to pay attention to all these layers. Cinematography also takes full advantage of the stunning natural scenery of Fuji Kawaguchiko, the little town where the series was filmed. Anyway, The Hotspot is just beautiful to look at. I must confess that this visual identity was one thing that I was just amazed. There is always a lot of movement within the frame, but the show clearly knows how to use camera movement to emphasize the comical element in a sequence. Actually, humor is meticulously built in The Hotspot through several different layers. Dialogue, delivery, composition, camera movement, narration, they all work together to help us find the hilarity in the mundane, highlighting how we are all a bit silly and contradictory. Dry humor is a well-known Baccarismo trademark, and here he once again nails it, but we needed to extend our praise to this incredible cast who have perfect comic timing and such a natural delivery that it's just impossible to imagine The Hotspot without them. Beyond their individual charisma, their synergy becomes a vital element to the show to strengthen the script and the show's themes. And finally, I have to mention that Fox Capture Plan offers a score with their typical jazzy feel to it, but with this otherworldly quality that fits the show to a T. So technically speaking, I think Hotspot is excellent, simply excellent. So the final question is, should you watch The Hotspot? The Hotspot explores our human essence in all its strangeness and complexity. Through a straightforward yet inviting story about belonging and collectivity, it celebrates the joy in the routine, the beauty of our friendships, and our inherent ability to adapt and welcome the uniqueness that lives within us and around us. Funny, optimistic, and skillfully executed, The Hotspot is an easy and compelling watch. The Hotspot is on Netflix. Now, quick reminder that this review is also on the Blossom Reviews, so I'll leave the link in the description if you want to check it out. And over on Substack, we reviewed Tastefully Yours this week. I'll also leave a link if you want to give it a read. Guys, I really hope that you like this video and you subscribe so I can see you here every week for a new review. Thank you so very much for being here. Remember to leave a comment with your own thoughts and ideas on the hotspot, and take very, very good care of yourself. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you very soon. Big kiss. Thank you.